Good afternoon, Keith Tebow from FRCMedia. Thank you for joining us today. The election is just a few weeks away, and we've done a lot of programming around the election. We've spoken to a number of candidates who will be on the ballot on November 3rd. But today we're going to talk about voting itself. And we've talked to this lady many times. We're pleased to be joined by Kelly Souza-Young. She's the Election Commission Chairwoman, the City of Fall River. Kelly, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Oh, good. And yourself, Keith?
I am doing well, thank you. I know it's been busy season for quite some time because of the changes that are going to be taking place this election season. We spoke to you prior to the primary. Now we want to speak to you as we head toward the November 3rd election. I actually want to go back to the primary first, if I could. We had talked about, I guess back in August, prior to the primary, about the increased number of mail ballots. I believe that number back then, and we'll talk about what it's going to be going forward, but was about 6,000 or 7,000. How many mail ballots were actually returned for the primary?
We received approximately about 8,000 ballots returned to us.
And was that the number that was sent out? Was the high percentage that was sent out that came back, I guess is my question.
We ended up, I think it was like 70-something% that came back to us.
And how did that compare in terms of what was that percentage as compared to the complete voter turnout for the primary? Were there more mail-in ballots and people who showed up to the polls either during early voting or during the September 1st primary?
Well, the total amount of ballots cast was 12,299. So I would say a good 60% was 60, maybe 70% was by mail-in ballot or voting in person.
Right. So voting prior to September 1st at that point, right?
Correct.
All right. So let's talk about November 3rd. People could still request mail ballots or absentee ballots, if you will, for the November election. You said back for the primary, there are about, 8,000 or 10,000. What are we looking at in terms of mail ballots for the November election?
So right now, as it stands, we are in the middle of processing approximately 13,000 ballots. That means 13,000 voters we have to send a ballot to mail.
And what is the process to do that? I guess lead us through exactly what your office has to do to process all of that. And I would assume that voters will be seeing their ballots fairly soon if they haven't already.
Yes, we actually started last week sending them out. We're still in the process. It's kind of like a 4 or 5 step process. We receive the application, and then we put it into our system, which creates the labels. Then we manually put labels on the outer envelope, the inner envelope, and then we put a barcode label for us to scan on the actual envelope that the ballot gets sealed into. So in the meantime, we're doing quality checking of each step as we do it. We make sure that the person, that the labels say for that person. We make sure the correct ballot is going to that person before we seal it, and then we mail them out.
So have you needed some extra hands in the office to do all this? How has that been working out?
Well, actually, yes, I have a staff of probably about 5 or 6 people in Election Central processing it, and then I have 4 more upstairs in the office actually scanning the application requests in, and then getting the labels prepared so the downstairs in the basement can process the ballots.
When do you think most people will begin seeing their ballots? Some may have already.
Most have. We're still in the process. We should have them all out by Friday, this Friday coming up.
And people can still request a mail ballot even if they haven't done so already, correct?
Yes, you have until October 28th by 5 p.m. in order for us to mail you out a ballot.
Now, in terms of people returning the ballots, they can return it via U.S. mail. They can also drop it off. Talk about some of those options that people do have here in Fall River in terms of returning their mail ballot.
Okay, well, like you said, you can go by the U.S. mail, or we do have a secure drop box on the 3rd Street side of the building. It is secured to the wall. And we also will have, during early voting, we will have that ballot box as well on the inside of the building.
So are you anticipating, again, another good turnout with the mail ballots? You had said about 70% or so return ballots for the primary. Are you expecting as high a number, if not higher, for the general election?
I'm hoping it is. I mean, for the amount of work that we did, I'm hoping everybody that took advantage of it will send their ballot back to us.
Now, I'm sure one of the mantras is that if you do have a mail ballot, try to return it as soon as possible, especially if you're using U.S. mail, to make sure that it gets back to government center in time. But what is the drop dead deadline in terms of people returning their mail ballots back to government center?
Well, you have until November 3rd by 8 p.m. If it's being mailed to us by U.S. mail and it's in the country, you have, as long as it's postmarked by November 3rd, we have up until November 6th to accept it. And then if it's from out of the country, like our UOCAVA, which is basically military and people living outside of the country, as long as it's postmarked by the 3rd, we have until November 13th to accept it.
So as much as people think they have some time, and it's sort of difficult in some ways where, if you get a ballot early, it benefits you to send it back in. But if you're not sure about who you're voting for, you do want to have as much time as you can to get informed about the candidates. So let's talk about the next step in terms of voting. That is early voting. The city is taking part in early voting. It's actually starting this Saturday, correct? Early voting here in the city of Fall River?
Yes, it starts this Saturday, runs all the way through to October 31st. Saturdays and Sundays will be from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Thursday will be from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. And on Fridays, it would be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. because the building closes at 3.
And that starts this Saturday, again, just at Government Center, correct?
Correct. All the polling locations will be at Government Center.
How did that work out for the primary? Did you get a decent turnout for the primary in-person early voting? And I'm assuming you're probably going to get a few more voters coming up in the general election.
We got approximately 565 voters in person. So it was okay, but it was only a week of early voting. Now we'll have 14 days of it, so I'm hoping to get a better turnout.
All right, so as we head to the November 3rd general election, all 29 precincts will be open. Have there been any need to change any polling places because of any COVID-related or any other snafus that have come up?
No, as of today, no, there has been no changes. We used them all for the primary without a hitch, and we're hoping to do the same for November 3rd.
Are you in need of any extra poll workers? I know that's been a call across the country. Some of these communities and some of these states are seeking extra poll workers to help the load on election day. Is that something you're looking for as well, or is what you've got going to be sufficient?
We actually had an ad on the Secretary's, the Commonwealth's website just to get more poll workers, and we did get quite a few. We are putting extra people at the polling locations, let's say to do like affirmations if somebody needs to show their ID because they're inactive. We allowed for that. We allowed extra checkers, extra people to clean the polling location. So between, the people voting, so we'll make sure everything is safe and secure.
Now, as far as you know, is the city able to use any other funds than it would normally use for elections? I would think that your elections office budget for the year was set. A lot of these things are really outside of your control and the city's control. Do you know if the city's been able to use any, say, COVID funding, CARES Act funding for some of this?
We actually received a grant from, it's part of Mark Zuckerberg. It's a Life in Tech grant. which we received for monies that we didn't budget for. So we actually received about $52,000 to help with poll workers, hiring extra poll workers, hiring people to work for the to process the ballots for those 9 days prior to election day. We got extra PPE equipment from the state. So I mean, it did help out more than for what we needed.
I want to talk about the counting of ballots now. You just mentioned that the mail-in ballots can start to be processed 9 days prior to November 3rd. Walk us through what that will be like for the city of Fall River and your workers.
So basically, we will have 2 sets of poll workers. We'll have 3 bins downstairs, 3 voting machines, and the bulk of the ballots, of the mail-in ballots, will be counted, not processed on who was elected, the candidate. It's just on the process, just putting them in the machine, counting them, checking off the voter to let them know that yes, they did vote, they have voted, and then we seal them away. Election day is when they actually get put into the machine to see who won on those precincts.
So the mail-in ballots, if they're received prior to November 3rd, they'll be in effect processed. You'll check
Correct.
whether the voter who submitted the ballot is eligible to vote in Fall River. The ballot will be unsealed and put in a machine. It'll be recorded on those little memory chips that you use in the machines, but the ballots won't officially be tabulated as part of the official vote until the end of the night on November 3rd, correct?
Correct.
All right.
And everything will be sealed back up again and put back in the vault until election night.
All right. Let me ask you the magic question. In terms of voter turnout, you mentioned 13,000 mail ballots. The city has approximately 50,000 registered voters. So, that is, my math, 14% maybe-ish of the voters in Fall River, if my math is right. Maybe a little more than that, actually. So, I mean, what are you looking for a potential total turnout for November 3rd?
In the best case scenario, 100%, but I know that never happens.
Right.
The last presidential election was 62, so I would say probably around 70%, just because this is such an important election.
Right. And so many ways for people to record their vote. It'll be interesting. One other thing I still do need to point out, and this is just for information, even if you haven't registered to vote yet, you can still do so. I believe that is the 24th of October is the deadline for new voters to register.
Yes, and we have 2 voting sessions from 2 to 4 and 6 to 8 that day. However, if you come in in the morning while we're early voting, we'll still be able to register you to vote.
So you can register that day at all. And I think I asked you this last time. Is it possible for someone who registers that day, if they wanted to early vote, they can potentially do so?
Actually, yeah, technically they can. So as long as we're upstairs processing the registration, so we get him or her in our system, then they'll be able to vote, as long as they're eligible to vote when we put it in the system.
And again, as a reminder, polls open 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m., the traditional voting day on November 3rd. It seems like we're talking more about what is not traditional than is traditional, but that's just the way it's going to happen this year. Kelly Souza-Young, I appreciate your time as always. We'll see you on election night probably. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Keith. You have a good day.
All right, you too. And thank you for joining us today here at FRC Media. Have a great rest of your day.